this video, I will be going through very specific signs that may tell you it's time to explore, face, and tune in to your shadow self. We will also be going over what a shadow self even is and how mind-blowing it is to understand that it operates every single day and is entirely unconscious to you. Okay, so what are some of the signs? Well, typically, after you have made a series of life decisions, perhaps that you thought were in alignment with your highest self, maybe you made the decisions receiving some guidance from your intuition or gut feeling. Maybe these decisions were big. Some people might classify them as rash, but you knew in your heart that it was the direction that you should go toward. And when you arrive in perhaps this new reality that you have created for yourself, you may be surprised when there's still this it's kind of like the energy of like a dark, ambiguous cloud. And the energy is dull, but it creeps up. And you're thinking to yourself, energetically, that does not match what my intuition was telling me or anticipating back when I made a series of decisions that led me here. It doesn't necessarily line up. And so you kind of start spinning your wheels, grinding your wheels as you're in your new reality. And you can't crack the code. You can't figure out what this dull, dark, ambiguous cloud is that's hanging over your head. And it feels like it keeps glitching. And this is usually the point where consciously we're doing everything we can because we feel like it's an alignment issue. So what do we do when there are alignment issues? Well, we maybe do yoga, maybe we regulate our nervous system, maybe we do breath work, right? These are the things that usually do help to bring us back into our source energy, into alignment, but they're not working. You're trying everything and you still can't crack the code. Something feels off. Something feels not right. So when you arrive into this state where you're kind of like at your wit's end and you're like, what am I not seeing? That is, from what I've experienced, the exact moment and realization that it's very likely that the code that you're trying to crack is essentially being hidden from you consciously by your shadow self. So let's break that down. First, we'll go into what even is the shadow self. The shadow self, it's pretty mind-blowing, I would say, especially when you actually experience it within yourself versus reading about it. It's this entire side of us that is operating unconsciously. It's literally like a twin that you have that you don't even know exists. It's wild, conceptually speaking. And this twin, your shadow self, is literally operating all day long, unconscious to you, doing things, taking actions, having thoughts. It's doing everything it possibly can in order to keep you safe. So what that could manifest as is there might be things actually happening in reality, but your shadow self is preventing you or steering you away from seeing them, because seeing them and feeling them is very likely extremely discomfortable and is extremely disappointing, is extremely sad, is extremely painful, and it doesn't want you to have to endure that from an emotional or even physical perspective. So if you can't figure something out, it's very likely that it's your shadow self essentially hiding that or repressing that from you, from your conscious being. But the longer this goes on, you'll notice that the more you don't feel right and the stronger that feeling becomes. And so it can be very frustrating when you can't crack the code. And this is the time when it is indeed a good fit to match your shadow self, which is really hard to do and really hard to arrive into. So let's talk about how to do that. Personally, I work with the strain Ghost in terms of psilocybin mushrooms. And Ghost, I would say, is probably for someone more advanced in terms of working with psychedelics. And the only reason I say advanced is because this is not a fun process. Meeting your shadow self, things that your being is consciously hiding from you because of how painful they are, it's not fun. So when you take, for example, the ghost mushrooms and these things start coming up that essentially have been hidden from you, they are in fact really scary. They are in fact really discomforting. And so if you're not used to the process of how mushrooms do that for you, then yeah, I don't know that I would recommend it. But if you are ready for it, it's such an efficient way to meet and deal and process and realize all of the things that you've been suppressing. And this process, especially working with the ghost strain, will literally bring all of these into light so you can work through definitely a lot of crying, definitely a lot of sadness, because you'll realize these are things that you didn't want to believe. Perhaps you had an attached view ahead of you, kind of like with blinders on, of how things would be once you made these decisions. And oftentimes it's just not the case, and you've been suppressing the fact, believing the fact otherwise. And we know that the root cause of suffering is not accepting what is. And what this will show you is what actually is. So that first you can understand what reality actually is, and then you can work to accept it versus kind of just suppressing what it was actually telling you. Just to summarize this part, oftentimes we are very attached to how the way we think things should look, and when they're not, it's a very painful experience, and that's why we endure suffering. So ultimately, when you do this inner work and you see what your shadow self has been hiding from you so you can work through it, this really is the first stage to kind of ease your suffering by accepting and facing what is, so then you can move from there in a path that is truly aligned. And just to bring this back to the beginning, I don't think that this necessarily means that you weren't supposed to listen to your intuition in the beginning when you made all of these decisions that maybe brought about things in your shadow self. I actually think that that's all part of it to help you realize what you're about to, and just again add layers to the onion of what you constantly work to peel back through this spiritual and healing journey. So don't be too hard on yourself. Again, shadow work is ultimately huge breakthroughs, even though they're really hard to work through.